Hello and welcome to another episode of Research Goes Live, our program here at the University of Pannonia examining the research of doctoral students. However, today we do have a special guest. It is the rector of our university, Dr. András. Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Last year you gave an interview that was widely read in Hungary at the time. In it, you claimed that unbridled growth and prosperity will end by 2040 at the latest, and modern civilization will be in a serious crisis because climate change is already unstoppable, and there's not enough energy or raw materials to make the transition to sustainable systems. And the supplies needed for consumption are also running out. So therefore, the lifestyle we've grown accustomed to in Western civilization has only roughly about 2 decades remaining at best, and there's not enough time to make this transition. When and how did you become such a pessimist regarding this issue that essentially contrasts the consensus of the media and academic opinion?
No, I don't think that there is a scientific consensus on human development. Of course, politicians like to show that everything is all right and economic growth is unlimited and prosperity is never ending. However, from the side of science, there has been warning signals that might not be so. For example, in the 70s, in the early 70s, there was a report by the Club of Rome which claimed that civilization will be in serious trouble by the middle of the 21st century. And here we are, and we are heading into this crisis that is already on the horizon. So I'm not alone in this opinion. It's true that it is not popular in the media and among politicians because it does not involve GDP growth and economic growth. So it's something which politicians cannot base programs on. So that's a very simple answer to your question. And regarding the time when I came across the seriousness of the situation was a visit to the Museum of Natural History in Vienna with my children, and there was a temporary exhibition about mineral resources and about how long they will last. And there were very small numbers regarding the availability of resources in the case of many chemical elements which are critical to modern civilization. And that made me aware that there is something fundamentally wrong with the present way of living and economic development. And I started to look it up in the scientific literature, and what I found was even more alarming that I realized in the museum.
I see. So there was this moment that kind of woke you up to this fact of what type of crisis we're living in. My next question is, it has several parts to it. So is there no way for our current civilization to stop environmental change? Is it feasible to completely replace fossil fuels with renewable sources of energy? If it can, or at least drastically reduce our dependence on fossil fuels?
No, it's very difficult because I don't like the term renewable because material-wise they are not renewable. They have to be constructed from various materials. These materials have to be mined, processed, manufactured, and that requires a lot of energy. And heavy industry is almost exclusively relying on fossil fuels today. So if we are preparing or manufacturing such energy units like photovoltaic panels or like solar panels or wind turbines, they are manufactured using fossil fuels. And they have to be done beforehand, before they are used. So that is very difficult to replace or to phase out fossil fuels in the foreseeable future.
Are any elements of, let's say, photovoltaic panels or wind turbines reusable?
Yes, of course, they are reusable, but now we are in a process of transition, kind of revolution. We are increasing the rate of manufacturing in an exponential fashion. So it means that by the time unit becomes out of use, there will be simply not enough material to fuel the production, which is by orders of magnitude more than kind of 10 or 12 or 20 years before. So that increase does not allow materials reuse at a rate that is needed for production.
Okay. So really the only solution, if we can call it a solution, is to drastically change our habits, our energy consumption?
Yes.
That'd be it?
Yes. The energy that is not produced is the only renewable and green energy. Anything that we must produce is not renewable, at least not in terms of materials.
So you mentioned this idea of if it doesn't deal with GDP growth or essentially making a profit, it's not going to be a popular opinion, and it's not going to be very interesting. So is it possible to change the industrial sector's current mindset? And what do you think it will take for this shift in priority in our everyday lives to occur?
It's very difficult because the world relies so heavily on growth. And I think the whole financial system and the whole economy and also politics are desperately dependent on growth. So I think we cannot imagine an economy without growth. However, from the point of view of our resources, that would be desirable if we were able to somehow manage our life without growth. I would just call an example. For example, in China, between the years of 2011 and 2013, so within a course of 3 years, China produced more concrete than the United States throughout the entire 20th century. It's shocking that we call this development. And the number of people in China during this time did not increase. Despite the stagnant population, they produced a lot of infrastructure, and they are still doing this. So development in China in the order of 7 to 10%, which is tremendous.
Yeah, that's astronomical. That's a lot in such a short period of time.
Yes.
But that still kind of circles back to our question then on, can we change the industrial sector's mindset, or what will it take?
It's interesting that very recently I visited a few events organized by the church, the Catholic Church. For example, some weeks ago, Pope Francis visited Hungary, and I was invited to one of the events organized in Budapest. And also there was a conference in the Hungarian Parliament, in the building of the Parliament, about sustainability, which was organized by the church. And actually, the church is now the voice of reality or normality, which is absolutely stunning, because earlier church was against scientific revolution in the Middle Ages. But now, Pope Francis is saying that we should reduce our footprint on Earth. We should reduce our greediness or desire to have more stuff or more gadgets or whatever. So that's what is promoted by the church, but that's not popular in politics nor in economy, because it's against the myth of unlimited growth in the Western world.
Yes. We mentioned media earlier, and that also possibly has a lot to do with this, because obviously anything that is news and anything that is media always relies on viewership. And it always sounds good to say we've grown again, we've achieved again, we're making more money, our growth is more than last year, but just mathematically and financially speaking, that's not sustainable. There has to be a point where we top off, we stagnate, we correct, much like the housing market does.
Yes.
The prices of houses cannot go up to an unlimited amount, and everybody makes money off of it. And this mindset may have to change then, that there are going to be years when we don't have economic growth, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we have to accept that as reality. So regarding this, you mentioned the resources necessary, and this raised a question in my mind as I was preparing for today's discussion, was that this exponential growth in the human population is to blame for humanity's consumption habits. Do you feel that there's a global carrying capacity in relation to consumption?
Of course, there is. If you look at the available resources, then you can calculate how many people the Earth can carry. For example, if you think of agriculture and food supply, then you can calculate how much phosphorus, nitrogen is needed to feed the population. Of course, it depends on the diet. So if you eat beef, then the carrying capacity of the Earth is much less than when all of us eat insects or or vegetables, so that's different. But regarding given dietary pattern, you can calculate this carrying capacity of the Earth, and the same is for other resources. If you calculate some technological methods, then you can also determine how many of these how much infrastructure can be constructed from the given amount of material, from the current resources.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because that means that this is ever-evolving equation because there are so many variables. As you mentioned, it really just depends on what the current habits are. Now, if we change our habits, that carrying capacity can then change.
Yes. But it takes time.
It takes time, yes. Yeah. Nothing happens over just 10, 20 years. This is going to be long-term. And then talking about this whole idea of 10 to 20 years, which is roughly of our timeline going towards 2040, you feel that 2040 is this turning point. Now, just for our listeners now, in your opinion, what happens after that? What does the collapse of civilization or transition mean?
I don't like the word collapse because it's like Mad Max or some dystopian future, which might not happen in that way. What I anticipate is that we are going to have a rafting ride, a bumpy ride downwards, and there I think that's the best example or the best allegory best metaphor for such a downward trend. It's going down a river and getting the rafting is getting more bumpy, and we are hitting rocks, and perhaps some of us capsizes. Mm-hmm. So that's how I imagine the future. So life will be more difficult than we get used to it.
Right. Life exists.
Yes.
We're still going to be in the boat, but the boat's going to get rocked.
And some will fell out of the boat.
Lose a few people.
Yeah. But that's the life will be harder than today, because until now, our generation had a better life than their parents. But now that is going to change. So our children will have a much harsher life than we had when we were of their age.
This is a great bedtime story for my children. I can't. This is going to be good. But I do understand, because yes, there has been this generation or two of unbridled growth and consumption without really taking into consideration the consequences.
Yeah.
In a ways, there's this term of weapons of mass destruction. It seems humanity and individuals, we've become weapons of massive consumption.
Yes.
And this is destroying our planet. Yes. So for ordinary people, what will this look like afterwards? What will change that drastically that we will notice?
Okay, so I think that something like this has already started. Mm-hmm. So growing inflation and problems in the supply chain, global supply chains, and increasing prices, limited availability of some resources are already signs of problems that we are facing.
Mm-hmm.
And we usually attribute these problems to external reasons, such as war or COVID or pandemic or,
It's always something else.
some geopolitical issues. However, this is part of our future. So we have problems even before the war. The price of energy went up before the war broke out in Ukraine. So we already saw signs of downward trends before all these political turmoil started. So I think that will be our future. So we can expect crisis after crisis, kind of harder life for most people. Of course, not for the richest, because they get out of all crises even richer than before. But increasing poverty, increasing inequalities both within the societies and within the countries. So that's how we will proceed. But I think that we have some reserves. I mean, mentally, because we are living in a very comfortable world, and we can abandon a lot of things without compromising our values or way of life. We have still much left, which we can get rid of.
Yes, we have surplus. And there are things that are unnecessary.
Yes.
So I've heard some people make this argument before that we have to get ready because we are going to experience a severe loss in our comfort level as to what we were living recently. But I kind of see it more as it's not necessarily a loss, but an adjustment. We can still have a various comfort level, but we are going to have to adjust it to make it more lasting and more sustainable. Doesn't mean that we're abandoning everything and moving into tents and caves again. That's not necessarily it, but we're going to have to make that adjustment.
Yes, but it will be difficult for the majority of the society, especially for the young.
Yeah.
Because they have no experience about life before this very comfortable modern era.
Or at least in Western society.
In the Western societies, yeah. When I am talking about crisis, I'm always talking about crisis in the modern civilization, because it's the most energy intensive and it is most dependent on energy. I don't talk about aboriginals, indigenous people in the jungle, because they will be hit by the climate change, perhaps, but they will not change their lifestyle, because they have a kind of sustainable lifestyle.
And they adapt.
Yes, they can adapt and they have a direct connection to nature, so they have the ability to adapt. But modern civilization has completely turned away from nature, so we are very vulnerable because we depend on all these modern amenities and infrastructure to survive.
We're good at taking advantage of it, not caring for it.
Yes,
essentially. And this leads towards the next part of our discussion, is that in several of our episodes, the topic of climate change has been addressed in doctoral research here at the university. So we've had everything from phytoplankton in aquatic ecosystems, food supply chains, sustainable development, and so forth. The National Laboratory for Climate Change at the University of Pannonia is home to a wide range of this diversified research. And all 11 research projects are multidisciplinary. So they synthesize multiple disciplinary scientific disciplines. So what role can university education and research play in developing solutions or influencing societal behavior?
Oh, yes. Universities have a very large responsibility in affecting the mindset of young people, and especially those who will be leaders of certain groups and companies and will have power to affect other people. So it's crucial to have them informed about sustainability, but not in buzzwords, but in real terms, and in order to be able to communicate this knowledge to the society and to make or to induce changes in society, because that's which is most needed. I mean, changes in behavior, changes in mentality, the whole in the whole world. So that can be achieved only through education. University has a leading role.
Yeah, that is true. Especially as you mentioned before, that the way that we're going to influence change in societal behavior is not going to be overnight, and it's not going to be sudden. This is going to be generational. And if we learned anything from human behavior over history, is that humans tend to be more reactive than we are proactive. So
yes,
this mentality, this shift of teaching our students to be proactive. Let's identify the problems before they happen or before they get worse and see what we can do ahead of time, instead of waiting until it happens and then say, well, now it's too late, but let's see what we can do to change ourselves.
Yes, I think we still have time, but we need a drastic change in our mindset to be prepared for what is coming in the future. And when we are talking about future, it's in the case of such a large system, such as we are 8 billion on Earth, and this is a huge system with habits, with religions, with all sorts of things that keep us back. And when we are talking about future, then it's not really a kind of forecast, because many events in the future is based on today's behavior, today's situation. So the system is so large, then you can kind of see the future, even if it's not possible, but at least you can imagine what will not happen in the future because of the inertia of this very large system of society and economy.
This is similar a little bit to like a tsunami, where you do have an event that occurs in one place on the planet. The effect of that occurrence is not going to be felt simultaneously thousands of miles away. Until that wave gets there, it will take some time. So right now, we're creating the event, we're making the waves, but we won't see the effects of the waves until later, and by that point, it may be too late.
Many people already see this, but that it's not it's not popular. It's not the mainstream. But I think that there will be in the mainstream very soon. Currently, the politicians are denying all these changes because they have vested interest in economic growth and re-election.
Yes, I think they're afraid of their voters.
Yes.
Is another major issue.
The truth must come to the surface sometime.
That is true. And one of the questions that I think most just average, everyday people will have is, we understand that a lot of this change that needs to occur is higher level, systemic, but what can the average person do? So if they're asking, what can I do within my household? What can I do as an individual? What could be done?
I think that we can start to reduce our consumption, at least to be prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, mentally, a kind of spiritual.
That's like a training.
Training, yes. For times in which there will be no such modern convenience, and also get closer to nature, both human nature and nature, as the outside world, because modern man already completely out of nature. So that's I think at least those living in big
Modern
cities,
yeah, that's right.
they do not have any connection to nature. Then I think nature is something that we can learn from, and that nature can help us, because nature is really sustainable if we just leave it alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it can renew itself. That's the only still the only
Hope.
hope.
Really? Yeah.
Yes, that nature can renew. Nothing else that is made by humans can renew itself. We can make fancy robots that can do anything, can beat us in a chess game, but they cannot renew
It's
themselves.
not very useful.
No, yeah, that's
It's amusing, but
yeah.
not
Artificial
not useful.
intelligence is brilliant, but it is unable to renew itself, and it needs power, a lot of electric energy, and it cannot renew. So if it's over, then we have to manufacture another stuff.
Yeah. And what you just mentioned was also pretty much ties in with what the spirit of our podcast has been over the last few months, this idea of sustainability and returning to nature, being more in tune with nature, and also just allowing nature, leaving it alone, letting it heal itself in certain ways. The research that dealt with phytoplankton in aquatic ecosystems was one of those examples where the more human intervention, the more out of balance and the more difficult it became. But when it was allowed to heal itself,
Yes.
even if it was different than its original state, it is able to do so. And with food supply chains and sustainable development, it was very much the same on examining food waste, on how much it is that we actually waste that we could still be capturing and using towards something else. Focusing on local development and local markets within a 40 to 50 kilometer area.
Yes, that's the way forward, I guess, to get more modest.
Yeah.
And to live a life that is more sustainable, that requires less energy, and it's at least as comfortable and happy as our life before. So I think that we still have some hope in this respect, but we need to act now.
Well, I think that's a great message also to close on, is this idea that there's a problem and we can't necessarily stop the problem at this point, but we can still change our behavior, we can still lessen the impacts, and we can prepare for the adaptation that we will need to do in order to face this challenge. And a lot of that does start with changing our mindset and education.
Exactly, yes. Adaptation is the key.
That's how humans have survived up until this point.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Galencio, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation, also very enlightening. We hope that this isn't the last time. We hope you join us again. And we'd like to remind all of our viewers to tune in, and you could always find all of our past episodes as well online. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember that there's always hope. We just need to change our mentalities as well. Dr. Galencio, thank you for joining us today.
With pleasure.